Hello class, today I will be talking about President Nixon and President Carter and their foreign policies and how they implemented each one of those policies when they were in power. I'll be discussing it in detail, the difference between realism and idealism, and what each president did between the two. So I'm start with President Nixon since he was first, and then I'll move on to what President Carter did. President Nixon had a realistic and more or less a power policy with his foreign policy. So he worked with his advisor, national security advisor, Kissinger, and they proposed something that would later be called structure of peace. This was all based on a balance of power between the U.S. and the Soviet Union. Kissinger proposed that the international order in which stability was a fundamental goal rather than absolute peace. The goal was essential in America's past and it would play a role here in their policies. The only way to achieve this goal was that the international system would have to recognize each competing power and realize what was best for each other. And so, put another way, the only way for this to work was for each state or country to formally recognize each other's rights and interests, which was very different for the time. For instance, the U.S. didn't always recognize what the Soviet Union was doing, and then vice versa. So this really played up the tensions during the Cold War. In short, this foreign policy was largely defined by what was best for each country, as I already mentioned, but something that really stood out with President Nixon's policy working with Kissinger was, quote, negotiate when possible, use force when necessary. And so the way I understand this was he was more than happy to talk with old rivals and new rivals and try to come up with something that would work for both parties. However, he was not afraid to use his force, whether that was diplomatic force and embargoes or military action. So, President Nixon used a political approach and power to force his agenda with American and U.S. foreign policy. President Carter worked more of the idealistic approach. So this is something we all kind of strive for, and unfortunately it didn't always happen. But President Carter did a good job in executing his foreign policy. The idealistic approach starts with a few different things. The state and nation as the only one among many participants in foreign nations, values rather than interests, is predominantly, shaping foreign policy. Overall, global conditions, not relations between states, should dominate foreign policy thinking. So, what's going on in the world at the time should play more of an important role on what every other country should be doing to respond to those individual crises and/or events. President Carter worked really hard with different countries and third world countries to solve many problems, which he's now known for, where President Nixon he used his realistic approach, but it was also kind of a bully, depending on which report you read. But President Carter administration employed a global policy and idealistic approach to their policies, and that way they could ease tensions during the Cold War and those policies. So, according to the textbook, President Carter's foreign policy had the approach of a realistic but idealistic approach, and both presidents obviously did a good job using their foreign policy to ease tensions and start bringing the Soviet Union and China to the negotiating tables to build peace amongst the global arena. Thank you for your time.